through direct coordination with police to engage in political assassinations, Fred Hampton being a big example, through ATF and FBI interventions, armed interventions meant to destroy that particular revolutionary group. AIM being a great example of one of those groups destroyed. One, policing is objectively reactionary. Two, though, and this is something leftists don't seem to grasp, there are reactionary subjects as well. It is not just the people who are engaged consciously, subjectively in struggle. So where does this leave it? Where does this leave us? We have to recognize, yes, the theoretical aspect that leftists have been talking about since Marx of the structural dialectic. Yes, we need to understand absolute value and surplus value and imperialism and how they play out in the structural dialectic. But we also need to understand our real, concrete, materialist, objective and subjective factors, both of reaction and of ourselves. And we must be willing to create a new revolutionary subject for the 21st century to overcome both the objective and subjective forces of counter-revolution. And that's what I've got for you. For those of you who don't know or who are new, there's this thing, which is fascists, they never clap for themselves. And the reason why is because they're the ones who did the work, right? Everyone should be clapping for them because they're the super genius ubermensch who made it all happen. But communist leaders always clap for themselves, right? Because the communist leader themselves is not special and are merely a reflection and standing in for the people. So if someone doesn't clap for themselves, don't trust them. So, are there any questions, objections, rage, fists of rage? Yes?
Mostly just a comment, is how when you have oppression, it naturally invites more revolt, and of course vice versa, when there's a strong revolt or violent revolt that fails, then it invites more oppression and so forth. And so it's kind of this reactionary process that could happen and so forth. And anyway, so I was just saying, you definitely want to be wise, and if you're both the oppressing party or the revolting party, that you don't fail.
Yeah.
Because you're just going to invite a stronger opposing end.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. This is, I mean, right, the term that we use is it's a dialectical process. For every revolt, there is a dialectic of repression and oppression that stands against it. And so, right, this is the force of interplay, right? And of course, you're absolutely right, right? This is why we need materialism. You should be wise to those forces arrayed against you, and also you should be wise and neither too suspicious as the French Communist Party was, nor too optimistic as, say, the Weather Underground was, of what your actual objective and subjective forces are. But yeah, I completely agree. Josh, you have a hand? Or Jacob?
Yeah, Marx famously talks about this moment when there's all this capitalist oppression going on, and then just all of a sudden there's going to be this eruption, right? Like some sort of gopher poking out of the ground. It seems to me that at least an initial gloss of a statement like that is that he's saying that the objective circumstances of capitalism will eventually undo itself, as he lays out in many ways. Is that, would you say that that is Marx saying that's an objective circumstance, or how would you interpret something like that?
Well, what we would need to keep in mind is, again, the structural and the historical dialectic. So a lot of his theoretical works, what he's talking about is the structural dialectic of capitalism. Basically, he's saying, look, capitalism is arrayed to keep engendering oppression. And you get this really clearly in, Introduction to Critique of Hegel's Theory of Right. You get this really good in the Manifesto. You get this really good in the Critique of German Ideology, right? You get this, that's more or less where you're coming from with this. And yeah, that's right. That's the structural dialectic. But also, this is an oft-neglected, I'm not saying you're doing it, but this is an oft-neglected part of Marx, is we also need to look at his historical dialectic. Everyone's all hip to read the Communist Manifesto and the German ideology and the philosophical and economic manuscripts and Das Kapital. And those are great. They're great to read. But also what we need to read is we need to read the 18th of Brumaire. We need to read on the Civil War in France, right? We need to read his critique of the Goethe program, where you have Marx engage in a materialist dialectic, the historical dialectic of his time, where we see Marx actually cataloging, for example, in the 18th of Brumaire, the objective factors of repression in France, most specifically the Party of Order, but then also the subjective factors of repression in the case of Napoleon III. And so, yes, Marx does say those things. Yes, we should read them. Yes, we should understand them. Yes, we should understand that there's an objective aspect. But we also must understand that that is merely the structuralist dialectic. And we must now become quite more wise to the historical dialectic. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Just side note real quick. This is one of the reasons why Lenin is so difficult to read in most instances. Because except for his explicitly philosophical works, like the critique of empirio-criticism or his philosophical notebooks, if you read What Is to Be Done, if you read State and Revolution, Lenin is engaged simultaneously in the structural dialectic, for example, the conception of state as a matter of class repression. I mean, that's structural. But then also, he's engaged in historical materialism. He's making particular historical arguments, and by historical I mean imminent materialist arguments against this newspaper or that brand of socialism that is alive today, right? This is why Lenin is so polemical, because he's actively engaged in politics while still doing that theoretical work of the structuralist dialectic. So I just wanted to add that caveat. Josh, Mr. Vice President.
Just for my own clarification, so do postmodernists see a revolution then as just two competing subjectivities at war with each other?
Actually,
no objectivity involved?
Actually, the exact opposite. Most postmoderns actually see it as a matter of just objective struggle. Now, we have to be really careful about the terms objective, subjective. In this case, in a Marxian sense of an objective struggle of two terms. In a Marxian sense. But if you're talking about objective like that's real and that's accurate, as opposed to subjective like that's your opinion, then no, right? That's not what we're talking about. But I mean, the most famous postmodern that I use as the most famous postmodern Marxist that I use as my whipping boy is Antonio Negri. And Antonio Negri basically takes his notion of class struggle and multitude right out of the final chapter of History of Sexuality, Volume 1, from Michel Foucault. And the idea is there's an interplay of forces. There's the capitalist forces, and there's the communist forces, and they push against each other objectively. And as long as capitalist forces are pushing harder, we'll have capitalism. And then as soon as we can tip it over, we'll get more and more communism until we get rid of all of them. But again, there's no place for a subject. It's just objective systems, right? Objective languages and objective bodies. And I mean, this is also why a lot of those leftists are against the party. Because what's a party except an objective form of oppression and domination and hierarchy? I mean, what's a revolutionary army except, subjective ideological or objective ideological violence, made manifest? And so, right, I mean, this is, I would say they fail because they only understand the structural dialectic. And they only understand it most when they're trying to do history. So, for example, any of those up with people, let's do Italian autonomism, garbage. I'm not a fan. Other people can give better arguments for those. I don't like them, so it's difficult for me.